It's time to do business again. We have 25 minutes to update you on what's going on around the world, especially on the African economy. And here's what we have prepared for you. Nigeria's crude production, that hit 1.5 million barrels per day. It exceeds OPEC quota, but it's lower than what we had in June. And also in Kenya, we see that they have a record high, historic high of 93 billion shillings revenue, and it's stronger because by non-oil revenue. And in Egypt, their reserve there surpasses what was expected, $50 billion. Welcome to the program. I'm Ini John McCrum. We start from the global oil space prices. Today we see it dropped. Investors are weighing global demand against continued supply disruption in the Middle East. The front burn month Brent crude oil futures, that was down today. So we see Brent is down 1.89% at $87.30 a barrel. WTI has also dropped 2.2%. at $81.56 a barrel. And then we look at gas and we see that has also recorded a drop at $2.78 for that. And obviously the deadly attacks on vessels in the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea, that is keeping investors jittery. A spill near Oman also, that's also feeding into the market. And talking about oil now, yesterday we saw those records showing Nigeria's oil production for the month of July. And it did show that crude, according to NUPRC, so we had both from OPEC and NUPRC. So crude oil output, according to NUPRC, was 1.505 million barrels per day in July. Condensate was at 170,000 barrels per day, bringing total liquids to 1.67 million barrels per day, and then exceeding OPEC quota. So OPEC quota for Nigeria is 1.5%. And then talking about OPEC, we did see from OPEC's perspective 1.54%, but that indicates a drop compared to what we had in June, 2.53% drop, because in June we did have 1.58 million barrels per day. I guess what is exciting Nigerians at this time is that it is 103% off OPEC quota, which is 1.5 million. So, but when you compare month on month, you see that drop of 2.53%, and you're hoping that it's not going to be permanent and that is not we're going to overcome it in the month of August. Output above OPEC is about 40,000 barrels per day, and they have 103. So let's see what this should mean for Nigeria, especially at a time when we see elevated crude oil prices, talking about Brent especially. And let's find out what the Vice Chair at African Energy Council, Mr. Chinandikwa, has to say about it. Mr. Dikwa, good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. So Nigerians tend to celebrate, especially from the government angle, celebrate the fact that we have above the quota. But when you compare it to the month of June, we see that it's a drop.
Is anybody talking now?
Okay, so but in spite of this, we can see that this is happening at a time when oil prices have surged. So this means more revenue for the government, right?
Absolutely, thanks for having me. So a few things to bear in mind. I know you mentioned a slight drop in production. Honestly, that is not the story. And if you ask me, that's quite irrelevant actually right now. The slight drop is practically irrelevant from my standpoint. I think the real news here is, one, this is the third consecutive month that Nigeria is producing above its OPEC quota. That has not happened in a long, long time. In fact, I'll take you back probably about a year and 2 months ago. But before the last 3 months, which we've produced above our quota, we have gone through a period, about 11 or 12 months, of trying to hit 1.5 million barrels per day, which is our quota. And on every turn, we fail. We come to 1.4, 1.45, and we fail to hit 1.5. And that's happened for the last 11 months. For the last 3 months, since the month of June, since the month of May, I apologize, we have produced above 1.5 million barrels per day. And that is absolutely spectacular. Nigeria's quota is 1.5 million barrels per day. What this shows to OPEC right now is that this is not just a blip. This is actually a technical increase in Nigeria's ability to produce above its quota. And that is super significant because, as a state, Nigeria wants OPEC to raise that OPEC quota perhaps to 1.8 or even 2 million barrels per day. For you to have that argument, you have to demonstrate consistently that you're producing above that quota. And I'm glad it's not just 1 month, it's not 2 months, it's 3 months. Hopefully, for the month of August, when it comes out, we can be above as well.
So you're not worried that perhaps this drop between June and July is maybe signaling a negative trend?
Yeah, not at all. I'm not worried at all. And honestly, it's a bit insignificant. Now, what I would say is, I cannot remember at the moment, but there is one of our fields that has just come off for maintenance. I cannot remember exactly what field it is. So that might have been the reason why we've gone down slightly. I need to follow up to see, is it back up and running at the moment? But certainly, I think the most important thing here is the slight drop is noise. It's just noise right now. And I think the real signal is the strength that we're showing to produce above 1.5 million barrels per day. And you mentioned it, Ini. Brent, the price of Brent today is approximately $87 per barrel. Our budget benchmark, our budget price, for this year is 85, dollars per barrel. So we have a decent headroom where we're producing above that, and hopefully that gives us additional more revenue for sure.
Yeah, more revenue. More revenue on paper. Are the people feeling this more revenue? Because obviously it should be more revenue for government, and then that should translate to more spending for infrastructure and welfare of the people.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. That is the natural expectation. But unfortunately, many times more revenue has never translated to better standard of living, more infrastructure, more spending on capital projects as opposed to recurrent expenditure. And all. We haven't quite seen that shift. Hopefully, as we go forward, that can start to happen. But you're 100% right. It is something that we're struggling with. Can I just make the point as well, Ini, that yes, our budget benchmark is based on $64.85. But don't forget, the volume, the revenue, the volume for this year was 2.05, million barrels per day, which again was really below that. So yes, there's money coming in, but from a volume standpoint, we've not been able to hit that volume for the year.
So what do you see? I know you're hoping that we'll continue with this trend of above 1.5. We haven't, recently, thank God, we haven't been hearing a lot about oil theft and vandalism and all of that. I believe the security architecture at that area seems to be working. So I guess we should stay optimistic that we'll continue this trend.
Absolutely. What I expect is this. One, it's very exciting that oil theft have been curbed very significantly. I'm hoping that story continues. What that means is this is translated to real gains, we're hoping. And if we sustain it for the next 6, 7, 8 months, I expect to start to see some of the FIDs, the final investment decisions that we took last year, starting to come on. So those barrels hopefully can come onto the market. If those barrels come onto the market and we're producing about 1.5 million barrels per day, hopefully that can take us to, depending on the production capacity, maybe 1.6 of pure play crude oil production. This is without condensate, yeah? With condensate, Nigeria produces approximately 250,000 barrels of condensate. So hopefully we can start to hit, that level of production.
And hopefully the revenue to the governments will translate to maybe more infrastructural projects and all of that, hopefully.
For sure. That's expectations. For sure, All
right, Chinandikwa, Vice Chair of the African Energy Council, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right. We leave Nigeria now, head to the eastern. Kenyan Revenue Authority's push to boost non-oil revenue that has driven its Customs and Border Control Department to a historic monthly collection, giving the taxman a strong start to 2026-2027 financial year. Customs collected 92.53 billion shillings in July, and that's the highest ever monthly revenue, exceeding the Treasury's target by 6.37 billion shillings. The collection was 107.39% of the target of 86.16 billion shillings and represents a 15.3% increase from the 80.29 billion shillings collected in July 2025. The biggest boost came from non-oil revenue, which has crossed the 60 billion mark for the first time in their history. Non-oil collections reached 61.50 billion shillings in July, making the segment a key driver of record performance as KRA seeks to strengthen revenue collection beyond traditional sources. And then we see what's happening with metals. Gold reverse costs to fall about 1% today. Investors book profits after softer than expected U.S. inflation figures that came out late yesterday. We saw that. So we see all the metals, the major metals, in the red. From spot gold, which is about 0.5% down, $4,444. Almost 1% down is what we see with spot silver. Platinum 1.83%. A lot of profit taking we see has happened right here. I guess investors were kind of happy with what's happened in the numbers yesterday. Palladium more than 2% in the red, and copper is also down more than 0.5%, almost 1%. And then moving away from that, the executive chairman of the Egyptian exchange, Omar Radman, has affirmed that the Egyptian stock market acts as a mirror to the country's economy. He notes that proactive measures taken by the Egyptian government at the onset of the region's geopolitical crisis since March enabled the central bank to play its role effectively, introducing strong exchange rate flexibility that successfully absorbed all economic shocks. All of this significantly restored confidence among both local and foreign investors. He also adds, pointing out that Egypt's foreign exchange reserves have surpassed $50 billion. That said, let's talk about a commodity today, and our commodity of interest is maize, a major input for ethanol production, livestock feed, direct consumption. Obviously, I'm sure you also do have it. In Nigeria, the price of maize, of a 100 kilogram bag of maize, has declined by 25% year to date to 40,000 naira from 50,000 naira. While the price of roadside roasted corn has also dropped about 28.6%. You can get one at about 500 naira now. It used to be over 700, and I know a lot of Nigerians like this. So let's find out: is this a harvest season impact, or is this sustainable? Favor Adekule is an analyst with Financial Derivatives Company and joins us for this conversation. Favor, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. Is this because of harvest season?
Good afternoon, Ini. Thank you for having me. So like you rightly said, the price of a 100 kg bag of corn has declined by 25% to 40,000 naira. Same for even roasted corn that is sold on the roadside. We see it going for about 500 naira, 400, even 300 naira based on the size that you are purchasing. And this is majorly because this is the harvest season of corn. It typically spans from the month of August through October. And so yes, this is the season of harvest of corn, and this has led to an increase in the supply of corn. Keep in mind that farmers also that have old stocks, they will be trying to ramp up that and put it out there, so that they could gather enough money as well for their coming other harvest season. So yes, this is the reason why we're seeing a decline in the price of corn today.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound sustainable, and unfortunately we go through this cycle year in, year out, a season where corn is available and cheap, and then a season where you hardly see it. I wonder if you've heard conversations around preservation, storage, off-season availability of corn. Have you heard of conversations around that?
Yes, definitely. I've heard about conversations on the preservation of corn, as well as the type of seeds that we use. There are structural challenges in Nigeria as to why, our corn that we even produce here is not even enough for us. And we have to still import, right, corn from outside the country. And I would say that, like you just said now, preservation, the right storage facilities, we have inadequate storage facilities. And it would interest you to know that about 20 to 30% of this corn that we produce are prone to post-harvest losses. Another thing is the type of seeds that are also used in, the production of corn. Research has shown by International Institute of Tropical Agriculture that the hybrid seeds are better and they are, less susceptible to disease than the open pollination varieties. And so those things, adoption of the hybrid seeds, for example, would help to, make those corns less susceptible to diseases, and we could even increase production from there as well. I know there have been initiatives like the Anchored Grower program to ramp up finance for farmers, but the government would have to look, above just government grants and all the others, right? So yes, definitely these are challenges that have posed serious detriment, right, to the harvest of our corn in Nigeria, or the production of corn in Nigeria.
All right. Thank you so much, Favor, for bringing us up to date on that.
Thank you for having me, Ini.
All right, let's go to the markets now at this time. Well, it seems profit taking is still the name of the game, especially here in Nigeria. We see at intraday, the NGX has lost 0.20% of each all share, 243,490.40. For Johannesburg, it's even deeper than that. That's the drop, 0.62% down. And then in Egypt, it's positive. More of cherry picking happened right there. 55,108.03. And then Nairobi closed yesterday positive, also 0.30% up at 2,000. Right there. We head to the Middle East and we see mixture of colors. Starting with Dubai. Dubai at intraday is negative 0.21%. Abu Dhabi is positive 0.24%. And then the Tadawul is negative, as well as Qatar 0.16% and 0.35%. In the United States, we see oil prices decline and traders are waiting more inflation data. We got that inflation number from the United States yesterday. We saw easing of inflation and I'm sure investors are happy, so that reflects in the market color. So the Dow is positive 0.20%, S&P is positive, as well as Nasdaq. Then we go to Asia. Markets closed mixed today. The Nikkei is positive, or closed positive, 1.16%. The Kospi also closed positive, but can't say the same for Hang Seng. Hang Seng closed 0.17% down in the red. And looking at other markets, the Shanghai and Nifty, they also closed negative at the close of trade yesterday. Let's go to Europe now and see if those inflation numbers, even though I think that was reflected in yesterday's trading, that's the US inflation number. But let's find out what's going on today with Chip. Hey Chip, good afternoon. What's the market's color today?
The market is green. Quite surprising. It's been a good week so far for European stocks, and they're still trading higher today. The Pan-European Stock 600 is actually up 0.1%, and here in Germany, the DAX is even higher, 0.4%. Strong corporate earnings reports are once again helping sentiment on European markets, which have been trading around record highs since last week, and investors are obviously hoping that rising energy prices won't be feeding into inflation and that those costs will be absorbed by companies. Now, the latest Eurozone economic data, INI, has also contributed to the positive mood that we are seeing on markets. In July, industrial production remained at the level last seen in June after 4 months of consecutive growth. So analysts had been expecting a decline, and obviously that was also another piece of good news that probably obviously has contributed to the positive sentiment, hence the green on the markets.
Nice. I hope it stays that way. And then we hear there's a new regulation on waste packaging.
Indeed, Eni, businesses selling here in the EU will face new packaging requirements like using less unnecessary material and empty space, in addition to making package easier to recycle. Also, an excess of harmful chemicals will be banned in containers like coffee caps and food boxes. And companies will also face stricter requirements for documenting that their packaging complies with the new EU rules, which took effect on Wednesday. Now, the EU has had packaging rules since the 1990s, but the way they were applied was quite different between the different member states. And the new rules have pretty much harmonized all of that and pretty much make it clear that businesses doing business, businesses in the bloc must comply with these packaging rules. And right now, authorities in EU countries will issue warnings and give businesses time to correct any breaching. So there won't be any fines or product callbacks to start with. And it will take some time also for European consumers to notice some of the bigger changes. But obviously, all of this is an attempt to reduce the amount of packaging waste per person by at least 15% by 2040.
Yeah, we know that the EU is very big on protecting especially consumers and the people of the bloc. But have you had reactions from consumers, businesses, how they expect this to affect them and their operations?
Well, if we look at the consumers, it will become easier for them to differentiate between single-use packaging and reusable packaging. From 2028, reusable packaging will need to be clearly labeled both in stores and online, and there's going to be a standardized labeling system which will show the material composition of the packaging so that the consumers can sort it when they're separating their waste for recycling. And another change will be, at least in some EU countries, the introduction of a deposit and return system which allows consumers to get money back when they return single-use plastic bottles and beverage cans. And of course, more than a dozen EU countries, including Germany, already have such a system in place. But by 2029, every EU country will be forced to have one. Now, this is not welcome news for businesses, of course. Being forced to have documentation for their packaging adds a layer of bureaucracy. And while big companies, of course, may be able to absorb some of the additional costs, for the small businesses, they are saying that these extra costs and the administrative burden pretty much amount to a sales ban. So we'll see how that turns out for them, and if there's going to be maybe a carve out for like one-person businesses or even the much smaller businesses.
Yeah, certainly an interesting one to watch out for. Chip, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks, Eni.
Let's go to the crypto space now. We start with stories making the round, or rather, let's see the colors. Bitcoin has been on 64 for a bit, but we see that it's dropped now. In 24 hours, it's lost to 0.64% at 63,584. And our Ethereum is back to 1,800. This is one resistance point that is so difficult for it to cross, yeah? So even if it goes up to 1,009, before you know it is back again. 1,887.19, almost 1% down in 24 hours. And we have all the rest, the XRP and a whole lot of the altcoins. And stories making the rounds from the crypto space. Ethereum, we see, is attracting growing interest from institutional investors, signaling increasing acceptance of the cryptocurrency beyond retail. Large investors and companies are expanding their exposure. So there you have it. Ethereum are drawing interest from institutional investors at this time. The United States is always in the news. We see a Securities and Exchange Commission, they moved to establish clearer rules, and they've been at this going back and forth. I believe it started last year, and it seems well, we have not gotten to the end yet, because SEC is considering a new framework that could clarify how crypto projects can raise capital and offer digital assets to investors while meeting security regulations. From the United States, we go to South Korea. Financial sector is deepening its involvement in cryptocurrency. The asset prepares to inject additional funding into crypto exchange Corbett, that's in South Korea. And those are the stories making the headlines in the crypto space. And that's it for Business Incorporated today. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. Tomorrow is another day, fresh and early. We'll start from Business Morning. I'm John McCall. See you tomorrow.